Today I'll be talking about the philosopher Descartes. He was a philosopher in the 17th century, as I learned in my philosophy class. And today I'm mainly going to be talking about his meditations. When I say meditations, I don't mean he sat down and went, I mean he was thinking or meditating on a certain subject. And that subject is, it stems from false beliefs. So Descartes looked around and he saw all these people that were disagreeing on what was true and what wasn't. And people couldn't figure out what the truth was. So he decides that it's best to tear down everything that we know and just rebuild the sciences from scratch and just start with the basics. So he realizes that if he's going to rebuild the sciences, all of his information needs to be sure. He needs to be certain of everything that he believes. So he subjects his beliefs to methodological doubt, which is basically just saying if a belief is the slightest bit questionable, then you should reject it as if it were false. So using this method, he tries to answer the question of what we can be certain of in this world. So first he looks at beliefs based on the senses. And his first doubt is that the senses can deceive us sometimes. We've all had experiences where we thought we saw something, but in actuality, it wasn't there. Or we misheard a word that someone said. So Descartes says, how can we be sure that everything we experience isn't a deception if our senses can deceive us? So everything that we taste, touch, smell, hear, and see, couldn't that potentially be a deception? His second doubt is, what if I'm in the middle of a really vivid dream? You know, when you have one of those dreams that's so realistic you don't even realize that you're dreaming? What if this entire existence is just one big dream? There's no way we can prove it, especially if our senses aren't reliable. So if this is true, then physics and astronomy and biology, really any science that's relied on observation, is doubtful. So if the senses aren't reliable, what about things like math? Can't I always be sure that 2 + 2 is going to equal 4? Well, Descartes says that what if there's an omnipotent being that's just messing with our minds, like some sort of evil genius or trickster that is making us believe, hallucinate that we're seeing this room right now, that you guys are hearing me speak right now. Some being out there is just tricking you. And so maybe 2 + 2 doesn't actually equal 4. Maybe it equals 5 or 6.3. We don't know because we can't prove that our senses aren't deceiving us. So based on these doubts of senses and mathematics, then everything we know could be fake. It could be false. So is nothing certain? Descartes says, the world might not exist, but what about me? He says, if I doubt I exist, then I must exist, since I have to exist in order to do the doubting. And if an evil genius deceives me into thinking I exist, then I must exist, since I have to exist in order to be deceived. And this is where Descartes comes with his famous phrase, I think, therefore I am. And you've probably all heard about that before when talking about history or something. But even though Descartes ultimately concludes that we can be sure that we exist, it still leaves a couple of problems that need to be answered. So for example, there's the problem of the external world. So I know that I have sense perceptions of material things. When I say sense perceptions, I mean when I see that American flag on the wall, or when you guys hear me speak, that's a sense perception because you're perceiving something through your senses. So I have sense perceptions of material things. But how can I prove that there is a physical world independent of my perceptions? So how can I prove that that desk is right there, or that Mr. Dooley is actually sitting right there? Even though I perceive it, I can't prove that there is a physical being to correspond with that. There's also the problem of the past. I know I have memories of past events, but if my senses deceive me, how can I prove that there really was a past that actually corresponds to these images. And lastly, there's the problem of other minds. How can I prove that there are other minds in existence? I see you all right now, but my senses could be deceiving me. So how can I prove that there are other minds? There's no way to prove it, since all I know is that I exist.